We cut out our pieces. Now, let's go make our quilt coat. But first, always remember to share this so it will save to your profile and you can find it when you're looking for it again later. We've cut out our pieces to our quilt coat. Now we're going to put our coat together. I know y'all are excited. I am too. We're going to start with the back piece. And remember, our pattern piece looks like this, and it said to cut it on the fold. So we folded our fabric and cut it. This is coat length, and this is cropped length. If you wanted a cropped coat, then you would cut your pattern right here and cut your fabric right here. Now, I want mine longer, so I'm gonna leave mine just like this. So this is the back piece. These are my two front pieces. Our pattern piece looked like this, and we had to cut two of them mirror image. And remember, we laid it on the side of the quilt that had the binding because we're going to use that for the edge of our opening pieces and cut it out. That's how I did it. You obviously don't have to. You can add bias tape to it. It's perfectly fine. So the first thing we're going to do is open our back piece all the way up. And I know this is the top because it has this little indentation. So you're going to take your two front pieces and you're going to line those up and clip them so that you can sew the top and down the sides. We're going to clip the top of this. Make sure that you lay them pretty side to pretty side. Now you have a small indentation right here. That's going to be the underarm part of it. So clip just below that. And you're going to sew across here, and then you're going to sew from here all the way down. Now remember when I told y'all when you were cutting it out, if it didn't end up perfect, it would be fine. Do you see how mine did not end up perfect? And I'll show you what I'm gonna do in just a second. Let me clip both sides on. I'm just gonna make the back of my coat a little bit longer than the front. So I'm just gonna curve this and curve that. Just like that. But you could cut it off if you wanted to. It's totally up to you. Now, we're going to sew right here and right here, straight stitch, 1/4 inch seam, back stitching when we start and when we stop, because y'all know my grandma scared me. And then we're going to sew from under the arms down to the bottom on both sides. If you missed yesterday's video, this is a $30 quilt from Amazon. Now, I have a few tagged in my Amazon storefront that's tagged in the caption, and these are the ones that I purchased. You can buy any quilt that you want or use an old quilt if you have one. Now, this is what we have so far. This is going to be so cute. The next thing we're going to do is cover all of our raw edges with bias tape. So we're going to take this bias tape. It's double fold bias tape. It's about 3/4 of an inch wide. We're going to open it and open it again. So it's all the way open. And do you see this crease right here? That's where we're going to sew. We're going to start this at the very edge, and we're going to place our bias tape next to the raw edge. We're going to sew down this crease, and we're going to sew that on this piece, not the underarms because we have to add something to that, down this side, and all the way across the bottom. Oh, and right here on the front. We're just going to line the edge of our presser foot up with the edge of our bias tape and the edge of our quilt. We're going to back stitch when we start and when we stop, and we're going to sew right in that crease until we get to the other end, and then we're going to cut it off. Now, after we've done that, we're going to let our bias tape naturally fold over this raw edge, and this is what the side we just sewed will look like, and this is what the other side will look like. And we're going to sew right here all the way down the other side. And when we sew this side down, we're going to sew as close to this edge as we can. Back stitching when we start and when we stop. And that's what our raw seam ends up looking like. Now, you're going to go add bias tape to this other shoulder and down the sides underneath where the indentation is for your underarms. So you're going to start right here, and you're going to sew down all the way around the bottom and all the way around the neck. You're going to add the bias tape, then you're going to fold it over the raw edge, and you're going to sew it again. If you look in the caption of this video, it says hometownquiltcompany.com, my favorite things. If you go there, there are 3 options. There's Walmart storefront, and Amazon storefront, and Missouri Star Quilt Company. Missouri Star Quilt Company, if you click on that link, that's where this elemental coat pattern came from. And this is the pattern that I'm using. I'm not saying it's the one that you have to use, but but it is the one that I'm using. And it gives you a bunch of options. You can have a long coat, a cropped coat, 3/4 sleeves. You can have a hood, a collar, no hood, no collar, whatever it is you choose. They all go together the same way like I'm showing you. You just pick the design and the size that you want, and that's what you make. The quilt that I'm using is from my Amazon link. Now, you don't have to purchase these quilts. You can use any quilt that you want. Maybe you have an old quilt that you want to use. I obviously didn't. So I bought a $30 quilt from Amazon. Now, the quilts on Amazon are not all quilted. They have a bunch of products they're selling as quilts, but all of them are not 2 layers of fabric plus batting in the center. Some of them are just printed throws. They look like a quilt from the photo until you get it in and it's one solid piece of fabric. So I have put bias tape down both sides of my coat. I have put bias tape across both shoulders. I just cut it, sewed it, cut it off when I stopped, then folded it over and sewed it down because I knew I was going to sew another piece of bias tape on top of it, and that was going to cover up the raw edge of that bias tape. So be sure to fold your bias tape when you start on the neck, and when you get to the end, cut it off about that much farther, fold it in, and sew it down. On the neck and around the bottom, you want to make sure you fold your bias tape in when you start and when you finish, because those edges you are going to be able to see, and we don't want any raw edge bias tape showing. But if you fold it in when you start and fold it in when you finish, then when you fold it over, you won't have a raw edge. So I folded it down when I sewed it. Do you see that? Now when I fold it over the neckline and fold it back over, there's not going to be a raw edge. Also, when I come right here and meet this bias tape that I've already sewn, this is going to go over that, so there's not going to be a raw edge there. And then I folded it down on the other end just like this. So now I'm going to sew the neckline down. When you're choosing your coat pattern, if you choose not to use the elemental pattern, which is amazing by the way, but you can use whatever pattern you want. When you're choosing your coat pattern, try to look at the photo and make sure the coat is 3 pieces, 1 back piece and 2 pieces for the front. You don't want a whole bunch of pieces to put together, or maybe you do. That's just a lot of bias tape to put on. So here is the neckline. I've sewn the bias tape on it. Now we're going to sew the bias tape on the bottom. So we're going to start the same way. We're going to open our bias tape up and fold it down so that there's no raw edge when we're finished. We're going to sew it, and then we're going to let it naturally fold over, and that will be what our finished bias tape looks like. I'm going to start at one side of the front. So I'm starting at one side of the front of the jacket. I'm going all the way over, and I'm going to finish on the other side of the front of the jacket. And when you're shopping for your quilt, we've already talked about some of the products that are being sold are not actually quilts. Well, some of the quilts that are being sold don't actually have stitches, meaning there's 2 layers of fabric and batting in the center, but they're using some kind of air pressure to create what looks like stitches, but up close there's no thread in it. So be sure that you're not getting that either. You want to make sure that you get fabric that actually has stitches. All of the quilts in my Amazon storefront are 2 layers of fabric and batting, and they all have stitches in them. But even if you don't like any of those, or you don't want to buy a quilt, you can quilt some fabric on your sewing machine, and then you can cut that fabric to make this coat. Or you can buy pre-quilted fabric, or you can make the coat like the pattern says. That's totally up to you. Now this is what we have. The next thing we're going to do is, after we make sure we've cut off all of our threads, is we're going to make our sleeves. Here's our sleeve pattern. I know that I want my sleeves long. If you want yours cropped 3/4, just cut your sleeves off right here. Now remember, I laid the end of my pattern on the edge of the quilt where the binding already was, so that I could use that for the end of my sleeves. If you didn't do that, add your bias tape here, and then the next step. We're going to fold it together, pretty side to pretty side, and we're going to sew up this one long side right here. Straight stitch, 1/4 inch seam, back stitching when you start and when you stop, because my grandma said so. By this point in the video, I have tried this coat on 7 times. Y'all, I'm so excited. And you know what? When you're making yours, you're going to do exactly the same thing. It's so much fun to see it come together. We've sewn both of our sleeves. Now we're going to add bias tape to the seams we just made, because we want to cover up those raw edges. On the end, we're going to fold it, open it, and fold it down so that we won't have a raw edge on our bias tape. And we're going to start here, and we're going to sew all the way to this end. When we get to this end, we can just cut it off, because this piece of bias tape is going to be covered in the piece of bias tape that goes around our underarm after we sew this to our coat. same way that you've been doing it. So in that first crease, back stitching when you start and when you stop, and sew your bias tape to both sleeves, to this sleeve and then to the other sleeve. This quilt coat has been a mission of mine forever because I want a quilt coat, and so does everybody else. But I'm like y'all, and I want to make my own quilt coat, but I don't have an old quilt laying around to make a coat out of. And in the middle of the night, I wake up and think, what about an Amazon quilt? So here I am at 2 o'clock in the morning researching quilts or quilt products on Amazon, trying to find something that's affordable and super cute, because I'm just like y'all there too. I'm not interested in spending a lot of money to cut something up that I don't know if it's going to work. So I ordered a few, cut them up, and decided I am a genius. I sent a picture to Sarah, who's my Missouri Star rep, and she said that's amazing. And my response, you misspelled genius. I am super proud of this idea. Okay, we've sewn our bias tape on. Now turn our sleeves right side out. So you're going to take your sleeve and your coat. Y'all, this is the very last step. Well, almost the very last step. We're getting close to the end. So you're going to take your coat and your sleeve, and you're going to put them pretty side to pretty side. Do you see this? So that you have your sleeve inside the hole that was left for your arm. Now, you're going to sew this all the way around, and then we're going to add bias tape to this, and we're going to do the same thing to the other side, and we're going to see what our coat looks like. Line up the seam, the bottom seam of your sleeve, with the side seam of your coat. I love to sew. I love to create. I just genuinely do. And I know y'all do too. And I go through phases. We've been through a bag phase, and then we went through a phase of eyelet lace. I'm still on the bags and the eyelet lace, by the way. But now my current obsession are these quilted projects. I bought the quilt to make a coat. I had some leftover pieces, actually a really big leftover piece. So now I want to make all the things. And I want you to drop in the comments, what kind of things would you like to make? And I'll tell you what I have in mind. I want to make a quilted witch hat. I want to make a quilted bag. I want to make a quilted bag with handles, a quilted Christmas tree skirt, a quilted stocking. The sky's the limit. It all is so easy now. Quilted pillows. Y'all tell me what it is you'd like to see, because I already know I want to make whatever it is y'all want to make. Yeah, I didn't make it. Me another spool of thread. On most sewing machines, the front of your machine will slide off. That is where most people keep their tools. I say most people, lots of people keep snacks there too, which is also a great idea. It's a great place for M&Ms or Skittles or whatever your favorite snack is. But if you slide that front piece off, you can put the whole arm around your sewing machine, and it makes it a little easier to sew. I know y'all are excited. I am too. So the last thing we have to do after we have sewn our arms on is to sew our pockets on. But I want to try mine on because I'm way too excited to see how it looks. That's Nana Ann at the door. So cute. I am filming. Okay, now we're going to add our pockets. Isn't it so cute? Okay, so I'm going to try mine on, and I'm going to decide where I want my pockets. Now, to be honest, I didn't even read the pattern. I didn't read any of the words on it, so I'm not sure how it says to go together. I'm just showing y'all how I would put it together. And I want my pocket to be right here, I think. Maybe close to the bottom. Okay, so I'm gonna put my pocket close to the bottom of my coat. Let's see, can you see that? Right here on both sides. But before I put it on, I'm gonna sew some bias tape around the raw edges of it. So I'm gonna put bias tape here and bias tape here, just like we've done on the rest of the coat. Nana Ann comes by almost every day. She comes by to check on me, make sure I don't need anything, to give me motherly advice, and to help me solve all of the problems of the world. She always sits out of the frame of the camera unless I make her get in it. But she's a good sport. And I'm pretty sure that I'm the luckiest girl in the whole entire world, because she and my sweet husband are my biggest fans. And I'm pretty sure I could sew the ugliest thing in the whole entire world and they would think it was perfect. And everybody should have a support system like that. Now, I've sewn my bias tape on. I've laid it on my coat where I want it to go. Now I'm just gonna go and stitch my pocket down. I'm gonna back stitch when I start and when I stop. And I'm gonna sew on this outside edge, and then I'm gonna come back and sew on this inside edge. I'm sewing mine twice because I'm kind of rough on pockets, and I just want to make sure it stays put. And to be honest, it would be kind of embarrassing to be walking around as a sewing teacher and stuff falling out of my pockets. And that's what I think of. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's see what it looks like. Nana Ann is right there. Y'all can't see her. But she's about to be my hype girl. let's see. Bum, bum, bum. What you think about it, Nana?
I think it looks great.
This is so cute, y'all.
I love that.
I'm already excited to see the ones that y'all make. My name is Tammy. I'm your favorite sewing teacher, and I would love for you to come sew with me.